This right here is the most important Pokemon battle of all time. A battle between Ash's Infernape, who has uncontrollable rage and is out for revenge, against Paul, a ruthless trainer who abandoned Infernape and will do anything to be at the top. This is the story on how an Infernape who had everything stacked up against him to fail, rose, fell, and maybe rose again. But to understand all this, we gotta take it all the way back to the beginning of the Sinnoh region, where Infernape was just a Chimchar. When Chimchar was a wild Pokemon, he feared for his life. One day, a group of Zangoose were trying to jump him over territory, and Paul ended up seeing this.
Yo, boys over here, let's get his ass. I found him, we found him.
I'm sorry, guys, I won't do it again. Please just leave me alone. I want to go home.
Even though the Zangoose already beat up Chimchar, they still wanted blood, and they cornered Chimchar to the edge of a cliff. Paul decided to tag along and not help Chimchar, watching him about to get massacred, and when all hope seemed lost, Chimchar tapped into his hidden power, surrounding himself in fire and being able to wipe out all of the Pokemon in an instant. Paul saw all of this go down, and let me tell you, he was the worst person to see it. Because the thing about Paul is, he isn't a new trainer, he just got off a 3-tournament losing streak, and he's looking for a new ace, so when he saw Chimchar, his eyes lit up like a cloud chaser.
I knew I had to have Chimchar for myself.
Paul proceeds to approach Chimchar and puts on a masterclass manipulator performance, making Chimchar believe he wants to join Paul's team. And with that, little did Chimchar know he was signing up for a life of hell. Fast forwarding some time, Ash Ketchum finally arrives in the Sinnoh region, and he ends up catching his first Pokemon, Starly. While Starly is vibing and flying around, a random Pokeball gets thrown at him, and we get introduced to Paul, trying to capture Ash's Pokemon. When Ash goes ahead and questions why Paul did this, Paul starts cussing Ash out, saying that he doesn't even want his weak Starly anyways, and that he should release it to get a stronger one. This obviously doesn't sit right with Ash, since he tries to love and care for each of his Pokemon. Then Paul goes ahead and flexes that he has multiple Starlies and releases the two worst ones. Ash is super shocked since he's never seen a trainer like this. I mean, Gary was bad, but we'll talk about him another day. All of this led up to Ash and Paul beefing, and they challenged each other to a 3-on-3 battle. Ash sent out Apom, and Paul decided to send out Chimchar, and they were vibing pretty well. Apom used Double Team to try to avoid some of Chimchar's attacks, but Chimchar ended up using Ember. The battle was getting pretty close, and Paul told Chimchar to go in for a Flame Wheel, but Apom ended up dodging it, hitting Chimchar directly, and Apom won the battle. Everything seemed fine until...
You're still just as useless as can be.
And damn, if Paul is saying this over a friendly battle, I wonder what would happen if Chimchar lost a big competition. After this, Ash and Paul went their separate ways, and eventually they challenged each other to a rematch, where it was Chimchar versus Turtwig. Chimchar was actually doing pretty well, completely decimating Turtwig, and when the battle was about to end, Team Rocket ended up interrupting it, and Ash, Paul, Chimchar, and Turtwig got separated from the rest of the group. This gave Ash some time to bond with Paul, to see that maybe he's a good guy and they just started off on the wrong foot. But nope, Paul is an absolute asshole and wants nothing to do with Ash. A wild Ursaring ends up attacking Ash, and Chimchar ends up defeating it, and then Paul catches it, adding it onto his team, and after they get out of this entire situation, their battle continues with Turtwig versus Chimchar. This fight, Chimchar was locked in because he didn't want to get beat by Paul if he lost, and he ended up burning Turtwig alive, and when Turtwig was trying to use Tackle, Chimchar ended up charging his Flame Wheel up and absolutely destroyed Turtwig, winning the battle. Ash was super disappointed that he lost to Paul, and you would think that Paul would be happy that they won. But even when Chimchar was celebrating, Paul told Chimchar that being pathetic is nothing to be happy about, and that he is still useless. Ash and the gang are sick of hearing all of this and call out Paul for being rude to Chimchar, and Paul goes ahead and says,
Nice to who? I wouldn't know what else to say to a loser.
What?
So it's pretty clear that Paul is only using Chimchar to try to tap into his secret ability and does not care about this Pokemon at all. And after this, Ash and Paul went their separate ways for a while. Paul started to realize that Chimchar got super powerful because of his ability Blaze, which makes him become strong at low HP. So he started purposely trying to injure Chimchar to activate this ability. In his first gym battle, he literally used Chimchar as a meat shield to try to get him to use Blaze. Surprisingly, it ended up working in this battle, and Chimchar got the boost of power, but he wasn't any match since he didn't have the type advantage in this gym battle, and ultimately Unfortunately, Chimchar ended up losing, and you should know the script by now. Paul is pissed off. You can just see the anger in his eyes, and he's not even trying to hide it anymore.
Chimchar, I'll deal with you later.
Bro, I don't even want to know what Paul means by this, but we all know Chimchar is cooked, so 1 sub equals 1 prayer for Chimchar, and what are you waiting for? Click the subscribe button to save Chimchar's life. The next time we see Paul and Chimchar, they're in a fight against Cynthia, the champion of the Sinnoh League, and her ace Pokemon Garchomp. And my man Paul, it gets to a point. Chimchar is like level 10 max, and Garchomp is level 60. It is like you were setting him up for failure, and surprise, surprise, Chimchar ends up brutally losing this battle, and Paul cusses out Chimchar. Ash ends up seeing all of this and thinks Paul absolutely does not get it. He needs to form a bond with Chimchar. After the battle, Cynthia ends up healing Paul's Chimchar and tells Paul that he's a pretty good trainer, but he needs to go easier on his Pokemon. Ash ends up agreeing and tells Paul that he's going too far and he's treating them like garbage. They end up getting into a fight where Paul says that he wants to get strong by any means necessary. Ash goes ahead and asks Paul why won't he be nice to his Pokemon, and just listen to Paul's reasoning.
Why don't you care about your Pokemon?
Cause then they'll get spoiled, and Chimchar's the perfect example of exactly what I mean.
Cynthia chimes in and tells Paul and Ash to go for a walk, and while they're discussing this on their walk, Chimchar ends up getting captured by Team Rocket. This is nothing out of the ordinary, and Paul ends up saving Chimchar, but it's what happens afterwards which is completely insane. Paul was calling Chimchar a bunch of names, like worthless and useless, and it was getting so bad that Cynthia had to jump in and tell Paul to stop. Cynthia started comforting Chimchar, saying that it's okay, and Chimchar shouldn't have to take this level of abuse. Cynthia tells Paul he should relax and spend the night at the Pokemon Center so he can calm down. Later on, there's this tag team tournament, and Ash ends up getting Paul assigned as his partner. When Ash asks Paul why he even enters this tournament in the first place, he says it's to power up Chimchar. Dawn, Brock, and Ash all know what this means. Paul just wants Chimchar to get injured badly. The battle was Rhyhorn and Magmar versus Pikachu and Chimchar, and it wasn't looking good. Paul was absolutely throwing. Chimchar managed to clutch up, and Ash and Paul won the battle, but Ash pressed Paul, wondering why he's trying to throw the match and just get Chimchar injured. Paul tells Ash to just stay out of his way, and they're gonna move on to the next round, which is the next day. While Ash is training with this Pokemon at night, preparing for the next round, they see something in the distance. As they end up approaching it, they end up seeing one of the craziest scenes in the Pokemon anime. Paul is getting all of his Pokemon to absolutely jump Chimchar for losing the match. Paul claims this is special training and a punishment for Chimchar not activating its Blaze ability. The worst part is when Ash has enough and asks Chimchar what he thinks about all this, Chimchar wants this. Paul has tricked Chimchar into believing this is the only way to getting strong. I have never seen a Pokemon trainer psychologically mess up a Pokemon to this degree. Chimchar needs a therapist. Paul continues to beat down on Chimchar, getting all of his Pokemon to hurt him, and Chimchar even realizes that this is way too much. But Paul doesn't care, and he tells Elekid to blast Chimchar with the final attack, and Ash's Pikachu ends up jumping in the way, saving Chimchar. This Pokemon is now in critical condition, and Ash ends up rushing him to the hospital, and after they end up healing Chimchar, it's heavily advised that Chimchar doesn't fight anymore. So at the next day in the tournament, Paul decides to use Chimchar as the star Pokemon. The worst part is Chimchar is up against a Zangoose, the same group of Pokemon that jumped him not too long ago, so it's just a bad day for him overall. The Pokemon Ash is using is Turtwig, and the battle is going okay, but they're losing a bit. When Zangoose was about to go do the finishing blow on Chimchar, Ash's Turtwig jumps in the way and saves Chimchar. Then here Paul saw an opportunity. Like the menace he was, he told Chimchar to use Flame Wheel into Turtwig and Zangoose. Ash was completely shocked his teammate is trying to hurt him again, and when the enemy Zangoose tried to finish off Turtwig with a Fire Blast, Chimchar had enough. He ended up jumping in the way and also saving Ash's Turtwig. This got Paul really angry since he didn't think Chimchar was a weakling, and he stopped commanding Chimchar after this. Paul forfeited the battle. He didn't care anymore, and it was up to Ash to command Turtwig and Chimchar, and even though they won, Paul was pretty angry. Outside of the tournament, Paul decided to release Chimchar. He said he didn't care about him anymore, and he's just going to get a new fire type. and this broke Chimchar. He was so confused he didn't understand why Paul was letting him go. He was trying his best. Ash and the gang heard all of this and questioned why Paul was even doing this, but Paul just left. He didn't care, and Chimchar was completely sad. He was a wild Pokemon without a trainer or a purpose anymore. And then Ash decided to ask Chimchar if he wants to join his team instead. Chimchar accepted the invitation, and from there he was a prime member on Ash's team. You would think it's all good now since Chimchar has a good trainer, but the story only gets so much more complicated. You see, the next day when Ash was chilling, he was training Chimchar, trying to get him stronger and help him out. While Chimchar was watching everybody have fun and support each other, Chimchar was having flashbacks about his life with Paul, and he was shocked that training could actually be fun. Chimchar has never had friends like this before or support unit, so he didn't know how to act. It didn't feel right. Later on in the day, Ash's Chimchar was sparring against Dawn's Piplup. Piplup was taking this like a casual match, but Chimchar looked like he was fighting for his life. Chimchar ended up losing this sparring match, and the second he lost, he started showing severe signs of PTSD. He remembered what happened the last time he lost the battle. He got released. Chimchar didn't want to experience that again, and Chimchar started to break down. Ash noticed this was all going on, and he reassured to Chimchar that he's not going to leave him even if he loses or wins, and that he likes Chimchar for him. Brock, Dawn, and all the other Pokemon were cheering Chimchar on, letting him know that they are there for him, and Chimchar started to cry and break down since he never was able to show his emotions before. Later that night, Chimchar was having nightmares about the Zangoose that beat him up and about Paul being completely rude to him, so Chimchar needed to take a walk to get his mind off it, and he ended up meeting up with Meowth. Him and Meowth ended up talking, and Meowth gave Chimchar some pretty good advice, letting him know his past doesn't define him and that he should look towards the future. Chimchar appreciated and fully understood Meowth's words, and honestly, Team Rocket is really underrated because Meowth has seemed to be the therapist for every single fire-type Pokemon that Ash has. Conveniently, the next day, Team Rocket and a bunch of Ash's Pokemon were getting attacked by Zangoose, and Chimchar was the only one that was able to save them. When Ash went to command Chimchar, he was really scared. He didn't want to fight the Zangoose, but Ash reassured Chimchar again that everything will be okay, and Chimchar was able to overcome his fear, saving all of his friends from the Zangoose. With all that being said, it started to look pretty good for Chimchar. He was locked in helping Ash with a bunch of battles, but then he ended up bumping into Paul. Paul's Elekid evolved into an Electabuzz, and Paul was talk trashing Ash as usual, so they got into a battle. In this fight, Chimchar was versing Paul's Ursaring, and Ursaring was completely destroying Chimchar, until Chimchar reached a boiling point, and his ability Blaze activated from his rage. His eyes was glowing red, and his aura was just different. He did one-shot Paul's Ursaring, but the battle got postponed since Chimchar was going crazy, attacking everyone and burning down the forest. It got so bad that Chimchar even bit Ash, but Ash was still staying calm and told Chimchar that it's going to be fine, and Chimchar managed to calm down. Even though everything was fine, everyone was wondering, why did Chimchar go berserk? In the past, when he used Blaze, this never happened, so this is completely new. We learned that even though Ash is being a good trainer to Chimchar, he needs time to overpack everything he's been through, so that's why he only sees red. Later on, Ash and Paul rematched their battle, and it's the fated match, the biggest rivalry in this series, to be honest. Ash's Chimchar versus Paul's Electabuzz. Because in Chimchar's eyes, Electabuzz was always treated like the golden child while Chimchar was treated like garbage, so Chimchar really wants to win this. When the battle first starts, Chimchar goes in for an attack, but Paul switches out Electabuzz. Chimchar is forced to go up against Ursaring, and they're having a pretty intense battle. Even though this battle seemed close, Chimchar was built different. He got a major attack off on Ursaring, and he knocked him out, causing Chimchar to finally get his revenge on this bear, and he evolved into Monferno. Monferno wasn't playing any games anymore. He learned the move Mach Punch, and he was moving like Ultra Instinct Goku, just thrashing around Electabuzz. You could tell that he was finally on par, and this is the boost of power that he needed. Electabuzz managed to get a sneak attack Thunder off on Monferno, and they both knew they needed to end this battle quickly. When both of their final attacks collided, after the smoke cleared, Monferno fell on the ground. He ended up losing the battle. Even though it was disappointing they lost, Ash and Monferno knew that they've gotten stronger, and one day they'll get their get back against Paul. Later on, when Ash and Monferno were sparring against a trainer, Team Rocket did their usual shenanigans and interrupted the fight and captured everybody. It was up to Monferno to try to help Ash and the gang be set free. But because of the damage Monferno took, he was just like Naruto, going into his Ninetales Rage form and just seeing red. Paul was in the area trying to help out from Monferno's mass destruction, and Ash was trying to calm down Monferno, but all the damage this Pokemon caused almost got Electabuzz crushed. In that moment when all hope seemed lost and all these Pokemon were done for, Monferno was able to control his Blaze ability and protect Electabuzz and Empoleon, and he evolved into his final evolution, Infernape. Infernape's vibe was completely different. He was calm, cool, collected, and strong, and Paul realized this. Paul was completely shocked this Pokemon was able to control its rage, and he said that he's looking forward to versing Ash and Infernape in this Sinnoh League tournament. Ash and Infernape knew everything was on the line here, but they still needed one more gym badge to enter, so they went together to fight the 8th gym leader, Volkner, and the main battle was against Ash's Infernape versus Volkner's Luxray. This battle was pretty even on both sides. These Pokemon were going blow for blow, but then Luxray was able to get an Iron Tail off on Infernape. And then it happened again. Infernape's Blaze ability activated. This Pokemon got up with red eyes, and everyone knew this was the last chance for Infernape to prove himself that he can control this ability before the Sinnoh League. When Ash called out to Infernape, he looked angry. It looked like he was about to fumble and crashed out. But then, in the last moment, Infernape showed Ash that he was locked in, able to control this power. Then Infernape used a massive Flame Wheel to knock out Luxray, earning them their final gym badge to enter the Sinnoh League. The league started immediately after this, and Ash and Paul made it to the semi-finals where they were facing off against each other. Paul's Pokemon were completely destroying Ash's because Paul set up toxic spikes, so any Pokemon that Ash brings on the field gets poisoned. When Ash brought out Infernape to verse Shedinja, he was instantly poisoned, already at a disadvantage. But Infernape had a plan. He used Dig Underground and then used Flare Blitz under the arena to light the entire thing on fire, burning up all the toxic spikes. Everyone was shocked that a Pokemon could even do this. Paul tried to retaliate by telling his Pokemon to use Giga Drain, and even though it was working, draining Infernape's life force, he locked in and hit Paul's Pokemon, knocking him out. Infernape had taken a bit of damage, so Ash decided to return him for a bit and let his other Pokemon fight Paul's next Pokemon. His ace Electivire was going crazy, running through Ash's team, and it got pretty bad. He knocked out Pikachu, and Ash was down to his last Pokemon, Infernape. But Infernape was still a little injured from earlier. Electivire immediately went in for a Thunder Punch, and Infernape retaliated with the Mach Punch. This attack pushed the both of them back, and when Electivire was charging up his next attack, Infernape was missing, because he digged under the ground and he hit Electivire with a sneak attack. Electivire was still standing and it was on sight. These Pokemon were just continuously trading blows. They were completely equal. Infernape got a little greedy, trying to end the battle with the Mach Punch, but then Electivire dodged it, and he ended up grabbing Infernape. This was the chance Electivire needed, and he went all out, shocking Infernape, and it literally looked like a public execution. Everybody knew Infernape was done for, and it looks like the battle was done. Infernape fell to the ground, and the last thing he saw before his vision was about to fade was Paul. Paul was trash-talking Infernape, calling him pathetic and worthless, and he knew this was going to happen. But this was just the motivation Infernape needed to activate his Blaze ability, fully controlled, being able to use it to fight against Electivire. And it was like Infernape was a different Pokemon. He got some major hits in, so Paul knew this battle had to end fast. They both went in to use their final attacks, Flare Blitz and Thunder Punch, which ended up causing a massive explosion. Everyone was waiting to see who the winner was, and then Electivire fell. Infernape was able to get his revenge against Paul and Electivire in the tournament, proving that he wasn't worthless and you can be strong by forming bonds and friendships, not just through brute force. Ash and Pikachu were so happy about how far Infernape has came, and Paul was able to accept this defeat. And with that, Ash advanced to the next round of the tournament, but we won't talk about that massacre. And the season ended off with Ash and Paul saying goodbye to each other, but this isn't the last time we saw Infernape. All the way in Pokemon Journeys, Ash had a Gengar who was basically like the successor to Ash's Fire-type Pokemon, since all of Ash's old Fire-types were training him. One day when Ash and Infernape were out in the woods, they ended up encountering Paul after all this time. And Paul was a lot more chill now. He challenged Ash to a battle, and Ash's Gengar was at the center of it. Since Infernape had some personal beef with Paul in the past, he made sure to teach Gengar some moves that would help him beat Paul. And Gengar ended up mastering them. When the battle started, Gengar did amazing against Paul's Metagross. Metagross. He was moving around really fast and Metagross could barely keep up. In the end, Gengar won the battle, and Infernape was so proud of his students. Paul accepted this defeat too, and he fully accepted Infernape as a strong Pokemon. I guess Paul realized Infernape is up now. This story is honestly one of the best character arcs in all of Pokemon, so I was super excited to cover his story. If you want to see another one I really love, the Lycanroc video I made a while back is on your screen right now, and I want to thank you guys so much for the amazing year you've given me. It has been insane. I'm doing a giveaway for some Corsair headphones on Twitter, so I'll put a link to it down below if you want to participate. And if you're still watching this far, I like to put a secret message sometimes in my video, so act like Infernape died or something in the comments, like rest in peace Infernape, and I'll heart all those comments and we can maybe trick people into thinking he actually died. Thank you so much for watching.